So it's lesson 9, part 2. We're working on our navigation bar for our Barry Eats site. So I'm actually going to just close all my files up because I got a lot of stuff open. So I want to go to, let's see, to log in. And again, I'm going to delete the first 12 lines from login. We'll require it. I'm going to do the same thing on the register page. Obviously, I'll change the title from login to register. I'll just grab that block. Delete my top 12 lines here. Okay, I've got a header on all of these. We also want to add the header to our restaurant page. Once I log in, go to add or edit, we're missing the header. So we've actually got these links here. We can delete this because we're going to have our nav bar up here instead. Same, we'll delete this logout link eventually on here. So on restaurant, I'm going to get rid of my logout link. And then restaurant singular at the top. Our title, restaurant details. We don't necessarily have to have a footer. I think the header is important. Some pages do. A lot of them don't no longer even have a footer. If they're long scrolling pages, don't even necessarily have a footer. So maybe for today we'll leave it out. We'll see if we want a footer later. All right, so now I can add. I can take these links out of restaurant. We don't need them anymore. So on my restaurant page, down on line, we can get rid of all of this. Everything with our doc type. So the first line of HTML should be restaurant details. This whole section we can get rid of now because all that stuff's coming from the header instead. We can just delete it. We have our PHP code at the top for header, auth, querying the restaurant, and then we just have our form. Now we can navigate everywhere we need to. So we want to build a quick home page, and then we'll deal with the right side of our navigation bar. Register and log in when we're anonymous, username and log out when we're authenticated. So I'm going to make a quick PHP file, which I'll call default. And we'll get rid of the 7 lines of HTML at the top. So this will make our 404 error go away. We can now click Barry Eats link in the nav bar, and we're going to get a blank page. Oops. So we're just going to put on a little bit of content here describing our site. You can say anything you want here. I'm just going to put on a description because if you want to show this site during a job interview, someone can go to the home page and see what the site's all about. I'll put in the link to my repository. Need to go and find the repository link. So you can say whatever you want here. I'll just grab my link. Put in your own repository link rather than mine. On a job interview, you want to show your application. You can see the home page, and you can go and see your source code. And on my home page, it looks something like this. Not the world's most beautiful homepage, good enough for our purposes. Actually, I'll just make the whole thing centered. So you can put in any description you like. You don't have to copy mine. So now we want to deal with the right side of our nav bar, and then we want to make it mobile responsive as well. So let's go back to our header. So now we need 4 links, but we need an if statement because we're going to show 2 and hide the other 2. I'll put on a PHP set of PHP tags and have if something else something else. So what do we want to check here? Right. So so before we check the session, what do we need to do? Right, we want to check if the user's logged in. So before we can read the session, what do we have to do every time? We have to call session start. Call session start. Access the current session. So if If our session user ID is empty, what do we want to do? What link should show? No, we're printing links. And? Right. So in this case, we're going to add 2 links, right? When we're not logged in, we want to show those 2 links. When we are logged in, we can just maybe copy here. So this first one, this actually isn't going to be a link. It'll just be an item in the name. It'll just be display only. This one will be a link to log out. So we want to print the user's name in the header. If we go to our validate page, remember when they logged in, not only are we storing their ID, but we're also storing the username as a session variable. So we can just print out the session username in the header. We did this last week. We haven't used it yet, but this is why we added this line 23, because I knew we wanted to display that value today. So in here, we can just concatenate username. These dots will concatenate. Now, when we're logged in, we should see our username and log out. When we're anonymous, we should see register and log in. So we can give this a try. Interesting. It says log out. We're almost there. Why did we get this message? You cannot call session start twice. So if we're going to call it in the header, we need to remove it from which file? Which file is also calling session start here? Yeah, our auth file. Actually, no, the restaurant, yeah, is called, the restaurant is calling it. So we want to remove it from restaurants. And we also want to remove it from the auth file, because this is now going to happen in the header. So as long as our header is before auth, let's try this again. Oh, I think it's here. We just can't actually see it. Right, because it's here, but because it's not a link, it's in black. So, for the moment, let's see, what do we do? We'll just put it in an A tag that doesn't go anywhere. I mean, that's the best solution, but workable. We don't have a user profile page, but if we did, you'd click your username, it would take you to your profile. You could update your password or change your picture or something like that. So we'll just do a number sign. There, that's better. So I click it, doesn't do anything, that's okay. So two other things we need to do with it. Visually, what's one problem? What should we do with these links? Yeah, let's push these off to the right side. So I believe, let's just see, there is a text right, but we don't want them to overlap. Let's just go back to Bootstrap for a minute. There is a nav bar right, so yes, potentially we can put these in a separate UL tag. There's our header. Okay. So we'll close this list. There. Let's see if this will put those links on the right side. So basically we have two lists, a list on the left and a separate list on the right. We may have to play around with these classes to get it exactly where we want it. I think we need nav. Nav, we'll try that. And then right. There, that's better. So in effect, we have two separate lists in our nav bar. Our list for everybody, and then our dynamic links that switch. So now we can go everywhere in our nav bars here. We can navigate all through the site. We haven't repeated ourselves now. We did break something. We've taken the session start out of here. So on our save restaurant and delete restaurant, these won't run anymore because we're not calling session start anymore. So we probably should require our header on these pages too. I'm going to take out on delete. Before we check our auth, we need to require the header. Session starter is called. That's both on delete as well as on save. We're going to do the exact same thing. Otherwise, we don't want session start. It needs to get called, but it only needs to get called once. So as long as our header runs first, no problem. Session start gets called right here. So that always has to go before our authentication check. Doesn't really matter that our delete is invisible. It's okay if the header gets printed at the top of the page. It's fine. So the last change to make with our header is we want to make it mobile responsive. So scaled to, like a phone style aspect ratio. We should get this little menu. We should get the little drop down menu. So if we just add a couple more classes to the nav bar, Bootstrap will do this for us. The rest of the site is fairly responsive. It wraps nicely, but our nav bar doesn't. So if we go to Bootstrap on this page, let's see, what do we need? I think we need this section here. So I'm just going to copy that. And they've actually got the homepage link inside of this section. So I'm on getbootstrap.com, the documents for version 3. I can put this code on Blackboard. Need it. So we'll try this section and see if it works. Put this here for a minute. So this would be Barry Eats. I'll just take that link out of here. We'll see if that does the trick. And if so, I'll post this code on Blackboard and you can throw it in yours. Okay, so it looks okay. Close. We just have to make this section collapsible. Expand, so we're not quite done yet. So it wants. I think we need to put this whole thing in a collapsible div tag. I won't spend too long on this. Okay, so the CSS is right. What we're missing, is Bootstrap has a JavaScript file that we just need to connect in. So that's why it's not running. So inside of my header, so we do have the bootstrap.js. So normally I might include it in the footer, but for now I'll just put it in my header. So we'll try one more time if this should solve our problem. Interesting. Bootstrap's JavaScript requires jQuery. We have jQuery, it's just not included. So I'll just include that in the header, and then it's global. All the files get jQuery. Normally, we would actually put this in our footer, but I think we're going to leave our footer out for just for today. Bootstrap won't run unless we have jQuery included. All right, one more try. Oh, jQuery might need to be linked first. I put Bootstrap first and jQuery second. We'll just clear this out. We'll do jQuery first, then Bootstrap. One more try. There we go. So there's a little drop down now. So I'll put this section on the Blackboard for you if you want it. jQuery first, then Bootstrap. And then we just close the div right at the bottom. Because Bootstrap needs jQuery, So it's a dependency. So the bootstrap JavaScript won't run unless jQuery is linked first. It has to find jQuery in order to run. Does that make sense? Okay, so I will just post this. So responsive bootstrap. And waiting at the bottom here. Help if I put it in the right folder. Okay. The code's in here. Down at the bottom. So your ULs go inside of this section. Link to jQuery first and the bootstrap JavaScript second. And then you should get our nice little responsive menu. So we'll see, we may put a footer on this later. I don't think we will for today. We can leave it this way. So now we've got pretty much the outline of a full site. We can register and log in. Our nav bar is going to change, as well as what we see changes based on whether we're logged in or not. So I want to spend the rest of the time we have today looking at how we deal with errors. Okay, so we talked a little about it already. So we said one common error would be something like this. So this is a really common error. The most common HTTP error is a 404. The user, either we have a broken link or the user browses to our site, but they type in an address that doesn't exist. So we don't really want to show them this. We want to show them a friendlier page that still includes our header and all our CSS and looks like the other pages in our site. But we'll need to configure our server so that if a user goes to a site page like this, it will check for 404 errors and take them to that 404 page. So that's one kind of thing. Here's other things that can happen. Right? So 404 error is common. We may get errors because our code is imperfect, bugs happen. We may also get errors when users try to do things that we never tested because we never expected someone would do. Obviously, testing has to be limited because we can't test every scenario on every page forever. We never finish testing and be able to launch a site. So we do our best, but sometimes users will do things we didn't expect them to do and they'll generate errors. Sometimes our servers go down. So our web server's up, but our database server's down. So anytime we try to connect, we get an error. Maybe the database needs to be rebooted. Maybe it's been compromised and the host is moving it from one server to a different machine. All these things kind of, they do happen. Okay? Hosting companies also get hit with DDoS attacks. What are DDoS attacks? Right, denial of service. How do those work? What happens during a denial of service attack? Typically, yeah, what typically will happen is an attacker will write a script that will execute thousands or millions of requests on the server all at once. And the server will just get overloaded that the processor cannot possibly handle all those requests at once. Or we may have other types of vulnerabilities that can generate errors on our site. And all these things will happen. So what should happen? What should we do if an error occurs? There's several things we should be doing because it's reasonable to expect when you publish a web application that sooner or later some of these things are going to happen. So what things should we be doing in building our application to anticipate and deal with some of the errors that might occur? Right. Wherever we're writing logic on server-side code, particularly if we're accessing the database, which is like every page, right? We should be using that. We use the same kind of structure. What structure do you use for error handling in Java or C#? Right. We should be, every time we want to connect to the database and run an operation, we want to use a try-catch. What happens? What should we do if we catch an error or an exception? We could, yeah, and what might that catch message look like on a website? Yeah. Do we typically want to show those error descriptions in the browser to our users? No, probably not, right? It's probably not safe for them to know because the error might be caused by a hacker. And now we're giving them a clue as to what they've broken. So what would be better than showing descriptive error? As a programmer, we want the descriptive error messages so we can fix it. But when our sites are public, what should we show somebody instead of a description of the error? Yeah, just a generic error message. Oops, something went wrong. We're sorry. We're working on it. Right? We don't want to tell them what's wrong. So on all our pages, we want to add try-catch blocks, and in the catch, we'll just create a generic error page. We can just redirect them off to that page. So the user doesn't know what's wrong, but we want to know what's wrong. So how can we do that? We have a few options. How can we become aware that errors are happening on our site without printing the error message to the browser and having the users call or email us and send us the error description? We don't really want to do that. So what could we do instead? Okay, so that would be one option, give the user the ability to report a problem, yes. Okay, now we can try to put it in the database. That may not always work though. Why? In what scenario would logging the error to the database not work? Right, if the problem is we can't connect to the database, then we can't write the error into an errors table if the database is unavailable for some reason. So we could write it typically, what's typically done is where would they be written instead? Yes, where on the host would it be written? I'll just log into a host and I'll show you. Right, but how, so that's what the user is going to see. How are we going to know? So one idea is write it to a log file on the server. And we could go and view the log there because it's not connected to the database. So that way, if the database is offline, we still have a way to write it. So we could go into the log and try to read it. Yep. One idea. Any other idea of how we could maybe find out that an error has occurred besides a log? What would, Raylene? Okay, yeah, we could do that. That would work. Any other ways that would be even easier, like almost automatic for you to get for you to find out that an error occurred and what the error was? that we could do inside our catch blocks. Yeah, in the catch block, we can grab the error and send it to ourselves in a message. Okay? So that way we know as soon as it happens, we have information. Okay? That way we actually look really good to our bosses and our clients. And I've done this for years on sites I build. So many times a client will call and say, somebody got an error, reported an error on our site. And I can say, I know, I already fixed that, right? Before the client's even aware of it, we can tell them. Now we have to be careful because we don't want our inbox filled up with, you know, if your site gets a DDoS attack, your inbox, you get, and I've had that where I've had to like turn off the error because I've had 1,000 errors come into my inbox in 1 minute. So I've got to turn off the error handling notice. And then I got to go and delete the 1,000 emails that come into my inbox. But this typically happens, right? This is also useful if the errors are caused by hack attempts. Okay. Years ago, I did some work for Walmart, and every morning I would wake up and there'd be about 24 emails in my inbox with the errors, and I could see all of the SQL injection attempts. I could actually see what people were entering in the forms because I had proper error handling in the catch blocks. I would include not only the error, but I asked the error handling to include all of any form data. So I could actually see what hackers were putting in my forms. And every morning I'd wake up and there would be, usually around 3 o'clock in the morning, users would try and hack the Walmart Canada Photo Center, and I'd get all those error messages. So we want to implement all of these techniques. So this slide's on Blackboard, right? So dealing with 404. So we want to use custom error pages, try catch, logging, maybe email, right? These are all kind of the tools we have to play defense against this stuff. So let's start with a 404 error. Okay. So this one should be the easiest. Now, the way we handle 404 errors, it depends on where we're hosted. Okay. A really simple way, some hosting control panels, they actually let you manage this really easily. Let's see what it's here. I can actually set up error pages right here. So for any domain, I can just put in, 404.php, and the server will automatically load that file. I can just go into the setting on any domain and set up error pages, which is kind of neat. If we don't always have that ability, we can do it ourselves. So we're going to create a file that's going to run on our Apache web server to handle 404. So the first thing we need to do is build a 404 page. Okay. We're going to build a simple page that includes our header and just says, like, sorry, we couldn't find that page. So let's build a 404 page, and then we'll configure our server to automatically display that page if a 404 error occurs. So let's make a new file, new PHP file, which we can just call 404. Take this stuff out and we'll include our header. Give it a title. Our header. Now we can just put a message on. So just some kind of like general error message. So in the browser, it's going to look like this. Good enough. Doesn't have to be fancy. So now we want to configure our server. So if any URL is requested in our domain that's not found, our 404 page is going to be loaded instead of this. So here's how we do that on an Apache web server. We're going to make a new file that has a strange name. The file name is .ht access, like this. So there's nothing before the dot. Depending on your operating system, you may not be able to see this file in Windows. If you're on Mac, you definitely actually won't see it in Finder. It's there, but you won't see it. So what we want to do here is set up an error document, error code 404. This is where we just put in the full path So this means if an error occurs with the code 404, load this file. I may have to put this up on AWS in order for it to work. I'm not sure if it's going to work on my Zip server or not. We're about to find out. The drama is very exciting. I'm going to go back and refresh, and hopefully this will redirect me to my 404 page. I don't know. So it does. Okay. Right. So now, if you're doing it on AWS, you need to first upload your 404 page, and then you need to create and upload the htaccess file that has the full path to your 404 page. Okay. So you need to create both of these files and upload them. But you've got to replace, don't use my path. You have to use the path on your actual website. So now our 404 errors are handled, right? The user doesn't see the general 404 page. They see ours. It looks like the rest of our site. It has our header. It has all our links so that they can choose another page to navigate. If we were building a website with C#, we do something similar. We don't use an htaccess file, but I can show you what this one looks like. If I just pull one up, let's see, I'll go. Let's see. No, I don't have it that one. Maybe somewhere I have. So here would be in C#, right? If we get a 404, we're going to redirect to this page. A similar kind of thing we're doing here. So we're using this htaccess file when we're running it on an Apache server. So this will deal with a 404 error. It won't, however, deal with any other kind of error. So what we want to do for all our other errors is we're going to basically make a copy of this page and just change the message. And then we're going to add try catch blocks. So if we have any errors, it will redirect them to our error page. And then we can add it so it will also email us the error. So I'm just going to copy everything here, my 404. I'm going to make a new file, new PHP file. I'll just call it error. Well, it's unlimited because right, any syntax error we make, any error in our code will generate an error. Well, there could be. There could always be errors in the site. So I'm just going to replace this We can just show them a general message that we know and we're keeping track of the problem. But we're not showing them a description of what went wrong. So let's add a try catch block, and then we'll deliberately break something and make sure that our catch gets handled and our error page loads. So maybe the easiest thing, let's go to our restaurants page. So this entire section here, we want to wrap this whole thing in a try catch block. Try to connect to the database, get the list of restaurants, and display them. But if we have any error, we want to catch it and take the user to the error page. Then if that works, we'll add an email notification. So right here, I'll put my try right in here, but I'm going to take my closing curly bracket, everything down to here. That's all the try. Try to connect, run the query, display the data, and disconnect. We want to catch. We'll just we're going to catch an exception, which I'll just call E. So what we'll do is just redirect the user so that they see the error page. So if anything doesn't work here, the user should see our error page. They won't see what's wrong. They just know something didn't work. Now, if I refresh, it loads, right? My try, it doesn't go into my catch block because our code is actually working. So let's break something just for fun. Let's change my table name to restaurant, which doesn't exist. So this should generate some kind of error because we have no query result. That's interesting. Okay, all right, let me try this, my variable which doesn't exist. See if that gives me an error. I'm a little surprised. Why is our try catch not working? Well, that's just a variable. I shouldn't get this. My catch block should get an error here. Okay, bear with me for a second. I'm going to try one other thing. I'm going to go and break my database connection. Let's just try that for a minute. I'll change the username, which doesn't exist. Curious. Get the same result now. Okay, so that one worked. I'm going to have to think about this one for a minute, though. So it caught our database error, but it didn't catch my syntax problem, like referring to a variable by the wrong name. Interesting. What if I make a common syntax error like this? Let's see if this catches our error. Okay. Oh, I think I know what's happening. Try catch will catch logic errors. It won't catch syntax errors. If I leave a semicolon out, it doesn't get included. So those I'm going to have to catch as I'm developing and testing and debugging. But it will catch logic problems, such as when my database is offline and I try to connect to it. So the other thing we should do here, I'll just break my database connection one more time. Before we take the user off, we want to send ourselves an email. We haven't sent mail with PHP before. I'm going to give you two really important warnings. Number one, with the PHP script, you can basically send email to anybody, and you can make it look like it comes from anybody's address. Do not abuse this. Okay? If you abuse this, AWS will shut down your hosting account pretty much immediately, and they won't restore it. You're going to have a hard time finishing the course if you don't have a server. Right? Number two, do not send me email from your script. Okay? Every year I post my code on GitHub that has my email, and someone's studying for the exam, and suddenly I get a whole bunch of PHP error messages sent to me. So please don't do this. So I will make sure not to put my own email in. And I don't even know if this is going to work. I'm on my local host. I may have to publish it to AWS for the mail to actually send. I should probably look on Xampp. One of these is a mail server. I can't even remember if it's, I think it's Tomcat is a mail server. I'll start it. So I don't know if this will work, but the mail should send when you're on AWS. Yeah, it probably won't work. So here's the function. So the function is mail. We put in the to address. Do not put in my email. Put in your own. You get a 0. So the subject is Barry eats error. And for the message, I just put in my E variable. That's the exception. So that will include information about the error. Now, I haven't specified a sending account, which is optional. You want to, you put in from : and then you put in the sending account. I'm just going to try it like this. As I said, I don't know if this will work locally. I'm going to try it. So I've broken my database connection. I've got the wrong username here. I don't know if this is going to give me an email or not. We'll see. Okay. No email so far. I'm just checking. It may not run on my local host, but it should run if you upload to AWS. Anybody try it and see if you got an email? You haven't? Sorry? Locally or on? Right, so I may have to. Yeah, so Mercury is my web server. Has anybody tried to upload to AWS and see if this works? Do you get an email? Has anybody tried it? Okay, try it and let me know. Yeah, the email's not coming into me locally. So we'll look at, yeah, it's not coming in, but that's because I'm running it on localhost. I think if I change my database connection to use AWS and run this on the server, it should actually send me a message, I believe. But I will have to try it. So not very complicated. We really only did 3 things, right? We set up a 404 page and the htaccess file. Obviously, if I'm going to put this up on AWS, I need to change this URL to use the live domain, aws.computerstudies/varied/404. We set up the generic error page, and then we added our try catch block to send ourselves a message, and then take the user to the error page. So this is most of what we need. Now, our pages won't crash with errors unless they're syntax errors. Our users will get friendly error pages, and we'll get notified. What I'll do, I'm going to stop the video stream in a minute. I will try this again on AWS just to see if the mail function actually runs. Didn't you put it up on AWS and it didn't send? You got one. Which email did you try and send it to? Where did you send it, Matt? On what domain are you on? Okay, so you're on Hotmail. All right, I'll try it in a minute, but I'll stop the video stream. So I've got to put in my credentials and stuff, my proper database credentials to be able to host it. So I'll push my code up to GitHub in a minute. I'm going to give you your lab. And I also want to talk for a minute about assignment 2. So here's what you need to do. So I will also add, I won't make you sit there and watch, but I'm going to add those try-catch blocks to all the pages that use the database. Every save page, all the restaurant reviews, any page that basically everything except the home page, register, and login needs a try-catch block because every one of those pages is using the database. So I'm going to give you your lab, which is here. Here's what you have to do for your lab. Actually, sorry, this shouldn't be assignment 1. Sorry, let me just modify that quickly. Should actually be lab 2. What I want you to do is basically take your lab 2. Remember, this was the list of the English soccer teams where you could edit or delete. I just want you to add error handling to those 3 pages. I guess there's 4 pages, right? There's the list of teams, there's the form for editing, there's the save, and there's the delete page. So you've got 4 pages. So I want you to add a 404 handler with the htaccess and try catch blocks for each of those 4 pages. Okay? You can use the same repository. You don't have to make a new repository. You can just make a new commit to your lab 2 repository and submit again. So you're not writing a new application. We're just taking one you've already done and you're implementing error handling in it. Okay, so it went to junk mail. Okay. All right, so that's good that we know it actually works. So the error messages to me, you get a 0. The error messages in the catch blocks have to go to you. Okay, and yes, I won't see them. I'll just make sure the proper code is there so that you are getting sent the error message. So this is a pretty simple lab, but error handling in PHP is fairly simple. That's basically what we need. Try catch, either email notifications or logging, 404 handling, and a general error page. That will keep our pages from crashing, keep people from seeing error messages, okay? And you have until Monday at 5 o'clock, which is lots of time. So I'll push my code up to GitHub in a minute. A word about assignment 2. I've modified assignment 2 a little bit. Originally, assignment 2 was due in 2 parts, and the first part was going to be due next week. Then you had 2 more weeks for the next part. I've modified the assignment so nothing is due next week. Okay? I'm going to give out assignment 2 at the start of class next week, right after our quiz. So our quiz, which will be at 11, till 11:15, we'll review the quiz answers. We're going to beat our average of 3.7. Okay? Because include, require, try, catch are pretty easy concepts that I think probably there's not too much for people to have to understand around those. So we'll do our quiz. I'll give you assignment 2, and then you'll have 2 weeks to do assignment 2. Okay, so it's going to be due November 28th on the Wednesday. That's the end of the month. So that's your biggest part of your mark. It's worth 30%. And that way it will be finished, because in December, during the last 2 weeks of school, that's probably when you have most of your other projects due. So our project will already be done. You don't have to worry about doing this one in the last 2 weeks of the semester. You can just study for the final exam at that point. We'll have a couple labs over the last 2 weeks, but the big assignment will be finished already. So make sure you're in class next week so we can walk through the requirements for assignment 2. Okay. All right, any questions before we finish for today? Yep.
So it's like out of next question. So I want to ask, like, instead of using the download files, so can you CDN?
You can use a CDN, no problem. Here's the only reason that there's 2 reasons I prefer not to use the CDNs. But there's nothing wrong with it, Kival. You're absolutely able to use the CDN. The first issue, you're talking about like for things like Java, jQuery, and Bootstrap, using the CDNs. First thing is, I find the CDNs are slower, right? Because it's got to connect and grab those files from somewhere else. They're not local. The second thing is, from a coding perspective, if you use the CDN, you don't get, the classes are not local in the project, so your code editor, it won't read the classes and methods from your CDN files. It will work in the browser, but you have to know what JavaScript methods you want or what Bootstrap classes. You don't get the code hinting. So I found, and I used to use, if you look in older repositories from previous years, until last year, I did use the CDNs rather than downloading because it's faster, but I find I like the code hints. But if you want to use the CDN, absolutely, it's totally correct and fine to do that. Good question. Totally up to you, Kival. Any other questions? Pratik? That would be, we'd work with it in the same way, but it means you can't use the same included file twice on the same page. So we couldn't, so for example, the header, we're never going to want more than once. So for the header, we might use include once or require once. But occasionally we might have like a component we want multiple times. Like maybe it's a file upload component. And we want to use that file and let users upload 10 different files. We might have include file upload 10 times. So we wouldn't want to use once. For our header, we could use once because the header will never, we don't want the header more than one time per page.
If we use require once, then again require
Then it will generate an error. If you use require once, more than once, it'll get on the second time, it'll throw an error and it'll say, this file's already been required once and can't be required again. This is what would happen. You can try it and you'll see, you'll get that error. You try it.
Like you for the sign session username for the header file. If we have username, then we will go with the symbols. But if instead of using this session one, if we use $get and the username, because we had from the user on the web,
Get will only work if it's a variable in the URL, right? It's got to be on the end of a URL. Get reads those values. Oh, I have to unbreak my site. Right. Get only reads those values. So unless we have it as the URL, get won't work. Get is only used to read URL parameters.
What do I have 3 more dogs right now?
We can talk later. Okay, I'm going to put today's code up on GitHub. I'll stop my stream. So next week, what we want to do is we're going to look at file uploads. We want to add the ability to add a logo to each restaurant and upload it and display the logo for each restaurant. So we'll look at how that works.